story I'm about to tell you isn't something I share often. It's strange, sad, and has stayed with me for decades. In the summer of 1998, I had just gone through a brutal divorce. My husband left after 10 years of marriage, said he couldn't handle my constant loneliness, whatever that meant. Truth is, I was broken long before he walked out. After months of feeling useless, I applied for seasonal work with the Forest Service in northern Minnesota. I'd grown up surrounded by woods, and the quiet always had a way of calming me. When I was offered a ranger assistant position near a small town called Ely, I took it without hesitation. It was my chance to start over, to breathe again. I moved into a tiny cabin the park provided, barely big enough for a bed, a stove, and a desk. But the lake was close, and the whisper of pine trees outside my window was the best lullaby I'd heard in years. Most days were spent patrolling hiking trails, picking up litter, checking on old campgrounds. But my favorite part of the job was wandering into forgotten parts of the forest, places where the trees grew too thick and trails disappeared into moss and fog. It was during one of those hikes that I stumbled upon something strange. About a mile off the main trail, I noticed an old path covered in dead needles and roots. It didn't appear on any of our park maps. Curiosity got the better of me, so I followed it. After about 20 minutes of walking, the woods opened up into a small clearing, and there it was, an ancient log cabin, almost swallowed by the forest. It looked abandoned, its roof caved in on one side, the windows shattered, vines curling through the walls. But what caught my attention was the faint smell of smoke. I thought maybe a hunter or a squatter had taken shelter there. So I called out, "Hello? Anyone here?" Nothing. Just the distant cry of a loon somewhere across the lake. I stepped closer, shining my flashlight through the doorway. Inside was a single wooden chair, a broken lantern, and what looked like an old iron crib against the far wall. Paint on it was chipped, but I could still make out faded blue letters carved across the front. They spelled a name, Ian. Sight of it gave me chills. Something about that crib didn't feel right, like the air in the cabin was too still, too heavy. Back at Ranger headquarters, I told my supervisor about the cabin, hoping to learn more. He frowned when I described where I found it. That property's been closed off since the 60s, he said. A family used to live there. Name was Callahan, but after their son died, the place was left to rot. I asked what had happened to the boy. Search teams found his shoes near the lake, but no body. I didn't know what to say. The idea of that small crib sitting alone all these years made my skin crawl. Still, curiosity got the better of me again. The next day, I went back to the cabin with a shovel. I told myself I was just checking for animal dens or anything dangerous near the structure. But deep down, I think I already knew what I was looking for. The ground around the crib was uneven, like it had been disturbed long ago. I started digging, slowly, carefully. The deeper I went, the softer the soil became. Then the shovel struck something solid. I brushed away the dirt, expecting to see an old board or root, but it wasn't that. It was a wooden box, small, weathered. My hands were shaking as I pried it open. Inside was a child's blanket, half crumbled with age, and something wrapped inside it, a tiny, fragile skeleton. I fell back in shock. For a few seconds, I couldn't move. The air around me felt like it was closing in. When I finally caught my breath, I covered the box again and ran to radio headquarters. The police and forensic teams came out later that day. They handled the remains gently, speaking in low voices, respectful, but visibly shaken. DNA tests confirmed what we already suspected. It was the Callahan's missing son, Dean. But there was something else. The coroner said the bones showed no signs of animal damage or weather exposure, meaning the child hadn't died outside. He'd been buried soon after death, inside that cabin. The official report listed the cause of death as undetermined. No one was ever charged. Both parents had long since passed away, but the mystery haunted me. I often wondered if the mother buried her son herself, maybe to hide the shame of something she couldn't prevent, or worse, something she caused. Sometimes late at night, I'd wake up to the sound of crying echoing from the woods, soft, distant, like a child calling for help. Once, I even thought I saw a small figure standing among the pines near the lake, just watching, unmoving. After that, I never went back to the cabin. They sealed the area off completely. Even now, after all these years, I still think about Dean. I never had children of my own, but I sometimes feel like fate led me there, not to find treasure or glory, but to give peace to a forgotten soul. Maybe that's why I can never forget that place, because somewhere beneath those whispering pines, a mother's secret still sleeps, and a lost child's spirit still waits to be found. I've worked as a park ranger for over 12 years, and I've seen my fair share of strange things in the woods. Missing hikers, unmarked graves, and even mountain lions in places they shouldn't be. But nothing compares to what I saw in the winter of 2014 up at Black Elk Ridge. Black Elk is a remote stretch of wilderness in South Dakota, miles of frozen pine forest, cliffs, and canyons where GPS barely works. That winter, we'd been getting reports of something killing deer. Clean kills, but with bones stripped and twisted like they'd been chewed by something large. Locals said it was a bear. No bear leaves antlers stacked neatly in a pile. One night, I was assigned to patrol the North Ridge, near the old ranger lookout that hadn't been used in years. I went alone, just me, my radio, and the crunch of snow under my boots. The forest was so silent that night, it felt like sound itself had frozen. I was about 3 miles in when I found a first set of tracks. They were long, too long, like human footprints stretched by something unnatural. Each print was narrow, deep, and set far apart, like whatever made them was running on all fours. My first thought was maybe a moose, but then I noticed something else. The tracks started out as hooves and slowly morphed into what looked like hands. I crouched down, snapped a photo with my flashlight angled across the snow. The wind howled through the trees, and for the first time in a long while, I felt watched. When I radioed into base, I got nothing but static. My signal had completely dropped. I decided to keep moving toward the old fire tower. It was only another mile ahead. As I walked, I began to hear something strange. Not footsteps, but breathing. Heavy, slow, and close. By the time I reached the tower, the sky had turned almost black. The wind had picked up, and the temperature dropped fast. I climbed up, hoping to get a signal on my radio. The higher I got, the louder the wind screamed through the pines. At the top, I finally managed to raise dispatch, but only for a few seconds. The last thing I heard was, "Ranger Danner, if you're still out there, don't follow the..." And then it cut off. That's when I looked down and saw something moving through the trees below. It was tall, at least 8 feet, and its limbs looked wrong, bending in places they shouldn't. It moved fast, darting between the trees like a flicker of shadow. My flashlight barely caught glimpses. Long gray skin, antlers that looked jagged and sharp, eyes like burning coals. I froze. I didn't breathe. Then it stopped moving. It turned its head and looked right at me. I ducked behind the railing, heart pounding. My radio went dead again. The forest below had gone completely still. Not even the wind made a sound. Then, from the dark below, I heard it. A voice. "Ranger." It was whispering my name. My name. At first, I thought it had to be a trick of the wind, but then it spoke again, clearer this time. The voice of my partner, Mike. Hey, Danner, you out here? Come down. Found something. Mike was on leave that week. There was no way it was him. Still, I looked down, and standing at the base of the tower was a man wearing a ranger jacket. Only, his limbs were too long, and his mouth didn't move when he spoke. Come on, Danner. Need your help. I stepped back, gripping the railing, every instinct screaming run. But I was 40 feet up. There was nowhere to go. Then, the thing started climbing. The sound it made, claws scraping metal, slow and deliberate, still haunts me. I shone my flashlight down, and the beam caught its face for a split second. It wasn't Mike. It wasn't even close. Its skin looked stretched too tight over bone. Its eyes burned red, and its teeth, God, they were too many. I fired a warning shot into the air, but it didn't even flinch. It just kept climbing. In a panic, I grabbed the flare gun from my pack and aimed straight down. When I fired, the flare hit it square in the chest. The creature screamed, a deep, wet, inhuman roar that echoed through the trees and fell backward into the darkness. The snow at the base of the tower hissed and steamed where it landed. I didn't wait to see if it was dead. I climbed down the other side and ran through the woods like a man possessed. By the time I made it back to my truck, the sun was just starting to rise. I didn't stop shaking until I hit the ranger station. When the others arrived, I told them everything. The tracks, the voice, the thing that climbed the tower. They searched the area for hours, but found nothing, not even footprints. A week later, a wildlife biologist came by to review the photos I'd taken of the tracks. He stared at them for a long time, frowning. Then he said quietly, "You know what the locals call this kind of track, right? Wendigo prints." I laughed nervously. He didn't. He just packed up and left. Later that night, when I was alone at the station, I pulled out the photos again. That's when I noticed something I hadn't before. Reflected in the snow between the prints was a faint shape. A second set of footprints, human, walking right beside them. The same boots I was wearing. I don't patrol Black Elk Ridge anymore. No one does. The tower was dismantled, the area declared unsafe. But sometimes on cold nights, I still hear the radio crackle, just for a second, and a voice, soft and broken, whispering, "Ranger Danner, come back." And every time I hear it, I wonder if the Wendigo didn't just mimic me, but somehow became me. Because lately, when I look in the mirror after a long night shift, I swear my reflection looks a little taller, and my eyes, they glow faintly red.